Okay, great. So based on how many people are here, it seems as though maybe Bruce needs no introduction, but I'll give it a shot anyway and give a little bit of a personal angle on it. So maybe how we met. We met at the Elixir Conf, I want to say 2017 dinner. I might have been 2018. But Bruce and I met there, and Bruce was really interested. He'd heard that I was working with Elixir and nerves and insulin pumps, and so he wanted to kind of catch me and have a conversation. Well, meanwhile, I found out that Bruce Tate was wanting to talk to me, and I was a little bit starstruck. If you kind of rewind that about 15 years, you might know why, because Bruce impacted my career very early on. I went to this little traveling conference that came to the Cincinnati North Marriott, right up by the place that I worked at the time. Bruce had already written a few books that I'd read, and the experience of just seeing him at the No Fluff Just Stuff conference, like in person and talking through stuff along with Dave Thomas and some other people, was just kind of it was very impactful for my career. It changed how I approach development, how I write code. I mean, it's hard to enumerate the different ways that Bruce's impact on people's careers and changed how he changed the trajectory of people's lives back then even. So we talked a bit at the ElixirConf event. I knew that I wanted to find a way to support Bruce in some way. And when I found out that Groxio was doing the Lone Star Elixir Conference, I knew that we wanted to support it. So I pushed pretty hard for the company that I work at Gaslight, to sponsor that event. And I managed to get to go to that, which was one of the last few in-person conferences that happened before all of this hit. So I consider myself fortunate for that. But it was at that conference that Bruce started to paint this picture for Groxio of what his vision of this idea of regional conferences and mentoring and just kind of the way to grow software developers and be more welcoming to a larger community of people into the Elixir community. And that has had a great impact on me. And I've just been looking ever since for different ways and different perspectives of trying to push that kind of thing forward. And so that was the kind of the impetus for all of this. And reached out to Bruce and asked if he'd be willing to speak. And I know that we've been combining the Elixir meetups for Ohio for a few times here. And so it seemed like a really good opportunity to kind of converge at one point and see all the people here and get a chance to have Bruce share all of his information with us, but also his spirit and the passion that he has when he delivers it. And I'm really excited for it. So Bruce, take it away.
Yeah, it's really funny. So on my screen, if you look at the right side of a Y, I have Tim Mecklem, I have Jeff Grunwald, and I have Greg Mefford. And those people were so instrumental in putting in on the last few conferences that we did. It is just overwhelming to me to see this kind of outpouring of support. We're a small conference, or two of them really, with Gig City Elixir, and then Jim Freeze said, we're moving out of Austin. I was going to shut it down. Do you guys want to take it on? And we told him that we did. But just the spirit of the community spirit to kind of rebuild that one with a whole new list of attendees. I think that 76 people, which is a little bit less than half, or a little bit more than half were new. A new set of sponsors, almost top to bottom, was really gratifying. So Tim, a couple of things. First, you have no idea how much influence that you have on the people that you touch. Your talk about the insulin pump and kind of that labor of love, and to be wearing an insulin pump on stage at the ElixirConf was just very powerful and moving to me. Second, you can't do a bait and switch if you announce the bait and switch in advance, right? So yeah, you're not supposed to tell everybody, hey, that we have this greater meaning behind, we're just going to do this cool LiveView demo. So no, the reason that I'm here is that I really appreciate the idea of diversity in technology, and I'm sometimes a little bit aggressive about it, and maybe over aggressive about it, but apparently there are others that feel the same way. So thanks for what you're doing on that front, and we'd love to continue this conversation with a future meetup, and I look forward to that day. Okay, so I have a couple of questions. Open up your chat, so everyone find your chat, and I want you to type 1, 2, or 3 in the chat. One is I am a beginner, or actually, let's just type the word beginner, intermediate, or expert. Don't press enter yet. And just to see where everybody is. So I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3, enter. Okay, so nobody will say expert. So Greg, you're an 11. Let's see, a lot of intermediates. Great. So what I hope to do today for the beginners, I want to give you a couple of tools that you might not have thought that you had in Elixir. So one of the things that happens when you're learning Elixir is you go to this really happy place called Pipeland, and then you start writing real software and all the pipes disappear, and you feel like that bait and switch that I was just talking about, right? So I want to give beginners the tools to layer your software in a way that you can spend more time in Pipeland and less time in a slightly less happy place called Withland. And so I want to talk a little bit about design. For intermediates, I would like to provide some tools for you to use to think about a framework for layering your systems. And for experts, I would like to give you tools that you can use to teach your teammates so that we can be starting to use a common set of terms. Some of these are from Dave Thomas. Some of these are from object-oriented development, and many of these are from James Gray, who's one of the people on the planet that I respect the most. Worked for me for a little while at I Can Make It Better, and it was, gosh, every day with James was an adventure. And I got to write a book with him called Designing Elixir Systems with OTP. So you haven't heard me say the L word yet. Yeah, Tim, I love you. No, so you haven't heard me say LiveView, but what I find is that when you code in LiveView, more of your time is spent in the happy places like Pipeland. And I think that that's a testament to the architecture that Chris McCord and Jose have worked together on so long. It's just a marvelous thing that when I put out this long Tetris video series, the biggest ding, which is a badge of honor for me, is where is all the LiveView, Bruce? We're building this interactive application, and very little of it has to be LiveView because I'm able to let the infrastructure do a lot of the work. So what we're here to talk about is a framework for designing an application, and the framework works with OTP, it works with libraries, and it works with LiveView too. So the application that we're going to build today is a memorizer. When I was a kid, I used to write basic games for spending money. Yeah, so some of you are thinking floppy disk, but no, this wasn't a floppy disk. It was worse. It was actually a magazine called Chromaset. So the Radio Shack color computer, and there was a cassette drive that you basically you just basically plug in with these auxiliary cables. Most people soldered their own. They went to Radio Shack and got their connector, usually saved like 30-40 cents. So it was totally worth it. And so I would send in these programs. One of the programs that I sent in was this idea that you could memorize something by typing in this long piece of prose that you want to memorize, like I don't know, call it a passage, call it a poem or whatever. And then you would press the space bar and a chunk of the letters would disappear. And you would press the space bar again and more letters would disappear, and you would keep reciting this until you were done. Well, it turns out that this is a marvelous functional problem for thinking about functional programming, because everybody that is new to functional programming tries to solve it iteratively. And then you can talk about the idea, no, there's this framework for thinking about the problem. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing screens now. I have delayed the inevitable long enough. And so I want to think about a couple of things. The first thing is this system of basically a language that we're going to use to talk about things, right? So if you're a beginner, you have heard the term reduce, and this is formally reduce. So add is equal to, so this is a function, right? So a function of, let's say, I'm going to lie to you a little bit, right? X plus y and, right? So this function is a reducer. One of those things is an accumulator. One of those is an element from a list. And so I could say list is equal to 1, 2, 3. And then I could say enum.reduce. And I could say the initial accumulator, I'm going to say list, and the initial accumulator is going to be a 0. And then I could pass this function in, right, which is add. Then I'm going to get 6 back. Okay. So I want to basically, I want you to turn your head sideways a little bit when I say the word reducer, because I'm going to use this a little bit in a way, in a little bit of a way that some of you more exact people might not appreciate. So I'm going to say my accumulator is equal to 0, right? And then I'm going to say accumulator. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3 is equal to my list, right? So this is a pattern match. This is going to get the first number, this is going to get the second number, and this is going to get the third. And this is strictly positionally, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with an accumulator, but recognize that this could be a function that returns any static value, right? So, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to do my first reduce step. And I know that I'm lying, but still bear with me. So add 1, and then I'm going to apply my second reducer. And again, still know that I'm lying to you. Okay, so what we have here is a reducer called add. And I will submit to you that if you're willing to hold your head sideways and call this thing a reducer, then in Elixir, everything is reduce. When we spend some time in our happy place in pipeline, it is a constructor function or just a variable, reducer, 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 and I get to stay in my one little world of the module if I will structure my code in the right way, where I build a function that takes an accumulator and returns a transformed accumulator of the same type. Okay, so that's the first point. Constructor, reducer, 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 and then transformer, converter, or whatever you want to call it at the end to basically get you into another set of accumulators that you can use with reducer. So we're going to go through an odd severity of lengths. It's a serious lengths to stay in this pattern, right? So the second concept that I want to talk about is this concept of layers. In designing Elixir systems with EJB, gosh, where did that come from? With OTP, designing Elixir systems with OTP, James and I came up with a bunch of rules. Actually, James came up with most of the rules, and I said, there's no shape. We need to provide a structure and a shape for this content. We said that it actually makes a lot of sense to break your system down into layers, and not every application has every layer, but I want you to repeat these after me, and you can stay on mute or you can come off mute. I don't really care. But say, do fun things with big, loud worker bees. Big, loud worker bees. So I can't see your lips moving. And if I can't see your lips moving, we're going to stay here all night. Okay? So do fun things with big, loud worker bees, right? And the reason that we're remembering these layers is that they stand for things that show up a lot in Elixir applications. So they are data, functions, tests. And we're applying tests. You could apply a test here and at the boundary, but we're applying tests here because we can do more interesting tests in the core with things like property-based tests, right? So this is where testing theory is going to come. So data, functions, tests, boundaries, life cycles, and workers. So think of your workers as dependencies. Your supervisors, I said life cycle. And the reason that I said life cycle is that that's what you should teach when you teach OTP, right? So if I say H supervisor, right? So I want you to pay attention to how many of these words are supervision words versus life cycle words, right? Life cycle meaning starting things, stopping things, restarting things, and children, right? So shut down, all these blue words, restart, permanent, normal, shut down, transient, restart, exit, right? Restart, terminate. These are all life cycle terms, right? So we're going to try to spend a lot of time in the core to do fun things. We're not going to write the test. We're going to do a lot of our testing in the console. And we're going to implement a lot of the boundary, almost all of the boundary in the LiveView and a few helper functions. But in Phoenix, a typical Phoenix application, the boundary would be the context. The core would be your schemas and helper functions and sometimes query modules and things like that. But what I want you to pay attention to in your next week, if you're writing a lot of Phoenix, what I want you to pay attention to is how much of your code lives in the boundary and how often you're composing with in the boundary, and how much better your life could be if more of your code lived in the core, if you did the work on the boundary of sanitizing and validating your data and then spent more time in the core. This is the most transformational thing that you can do as an Elixir developer. Okay, so we're going to start our application now. So I'm going to say mix phoenix.new, and I'm going to call this Mimit. Gosh, that's horrible. But I've had every possible combination of that in the last couple of, this is kind of my go-to talk. This is one of the last 2 or 3 times I'll give it. But we're going to build a LiveView version. I'm going to build dependencies, and dependencies with LiveView, we're basically going to build a rich user interface, and we're going to build it without writing JavaScript. That doesn't mean the JavaScript is gone. That means that the JavaScript is relegated to the supporting infrastructure, and that's what we're looking at, right? So to me, the most valuable thing about LiveView is basically 2 things. First, the abstraction is beautiful, and it goes all the way down to all the way through everything that we've talked about, the layers that we've talked about, through to an Erlang application with that exposes the boundary layer with OTP, right? And so the second thing is that it once again lets me keep my head in one place on the server. And that's really important. When we first started writing internet applications, it was so revolutionary, not because the applications weren't distributed. They were distributed. You had the client, and you had the server, but the infrastructure managed all of the distribution. And we're getting to that place again with LiveView. Okay, so I can say Phoenix.server, and now I can go ahead and start this local host, create my database repo. Okay, and I'm off to the races. And so I'm going to go ahead and go straight into the let's see. Okay, I'm going to go straight into the core. So we're going to spend most of our time in the core. So when we said the individual layers, not every application is going to have custom pieces of every layer, right? So the workers really are usually dependencies with most of the Elixir that we'll write day to day. The lifecycle is often cooked into the frameworks that we use, like Scenic that has its own supervisors. But the core is where if I can stay within that framework of the pipeline, that if I could build a constructor that takes clean data and I can maintain clean data by using my pipelines and using sanitized, validated data at every step, then I can spend a lot of time in pipeline. And that's what we're going to plan to do this time. So I'm going to go into Mimit, and we're going to build this new file. Let's call this is our core. So normally I'll type core just to kind of drill in the concept, but I think that this is an advanced enough group. I'm going to go ahead and give this a core a name. Let's call it an eraser. So the job of the eraser is to take a core set of pieces of data, and one of those is going to be, so we're going to take a constructor that's going to take some type of a passage. And let's find one right now. So let's say my go-to around now is Shakespeare. So let's see if we can find that one. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so we've got a passage here, and let's go ahead and just build a helper with a few passages in it. So I'm not going to namespace this. So I'm going to say def module. What could go wrong, right? But basically, I'm going to say that this is the Macbeth. And I'm just going to provide a here doc here that drops this in. And this is really a wonderful speech. So I'm going to start with that one. And then I'm going to go back into my eraser. And we're going to start to think about the structure of this. Remember, so this is, let's see, this is the Mimit dot, and this is going to be in the game, and this is the eraser. Right, so this is in Phoenix speak, that's the context. In Bruce speak, this is the boundary layer, but we'll use context, that's fine. So I'm going to say this is struct. And I know from experience coding this, we'll talk about why in a second, but I know that functional programs often work better when you build a plan into your data structures and unfold them, especially these things like multi-page wizards, we used to call them, or multi-page flows that collect a bunch of transient data and then finally commit them at the end. These types of things work better when you collect all the steps and the metadata that you need for all the steps in some type of a data structure that you pass into your reducer. So I'm going to say, I'm going to start with the schedule, and that's going to look like that. And I'm going to start with the text, and that's going to look like that. We could even, I wonder if we should say speech dot, nah, that's a little too fancy. Okay, so, and then I'm going to build a constructor, and that's basically going to take text and steps. And now we need to think of a constructor that I can build out of the text and steps, right? Or maybe this is build eraser, but let's think about how this is going to work. So I'm going to say, so I want some text to work with just to kind of play with the concepts. So I'm going to say this is speech dot passage, and this is Macbeth, right? Okay, undefined method, text. Oh, text equal. One of those nights, I think, I will put my bug density live coding up with anybody's in the world. It's elite, I tell you. Okay, so I have this passage, And now I think I want to cut it up. So I'm going to say, actually, I might not even need that. So the length of this thing is what? Maybe this is better as size. String.length and the text. And so maybe I'm going to start with the characters. 1 to size. And then maybe I can mix them up. Right. Okay. So now I have a list of random characters that's exactly as long as I need. And maybe the schedule that I need to build is just a chunk of characters that I want to delete in each step. Right. So if we have 4 steps, so what is our chunk size going to be then? Let's say it's going to be kernel dot divided by 4, so that's the number of steps, right? Let me mark that concept. Number, or let's call it steps. Okay, so I'm going to say, so size, and divide that by steps. Okay, and then I can take that, take the ceiling of that. Is that a thing? Okay, so yeah, so basically I think that now, so this is my step size. Great, and so now I can say, I can do this thing. And then I can say enum.chunk, what are my choices? Chunk every, and we want step size. Okay, so this is my plan, right? So in the first step, I'm going to delete these characters. And the next one, I'm going to delete these characters and so on and so forth. So I think that this is a great place to start from. So let's do this. So size is equal to string.length of text. And then 1 to size. And then I'm going to shuffle that, and I'm going to chunk that every step size. And what do we need? We needed a size, and we needed a steps. Okay, and then this is a private function, and that is a step size right there with size. Okay, and this is just so we know what that is. This, right? Size. I didn't save a lot of time with that SZ, did I? Okay. All right. So now we're well on our way, and we can build this thing. And this is that's a schedule. So now we can return this module. Okay, and this is going to take a schedule and a text. Okay, so this is great. This is a good start. So now I ought to be able to grab, so alias, and I want to say mimit.game.eraser, and then I want to say eraser.new speech.passage, and this is Macbeth, and I'm going to take 4 steps. Okay, there we go, and dropped a pair in there. Passage 1. Oh, yeah. That's 4 steps. Okay, yeah. So now I already have a pretty good start on this, and now I can start to work on my eraser. So def erase, and this is what I'm calling a reducer. And a LiveView application is going to be full of reducers. We have a reducer in the core, and this is going to take an eraser, which is exactly one of these things. But if you think about it, LiveView is predicated on reducers everywhere. So basically, the data for LiveView is a socket, and if you build small, tiny reducers throughout your application and pipe your socket through them, Elixir will really reward you. You'll find over and over that taking the extra step of keeping your handler skinny and piping your socket through your little reducers that you build along the way makes things so simple, and it will actually create a whole lot of reusable data that can be reused across the mount and handlers, or it can be reused from one handler to another, or can be reused from within a component, and on and on and on. But this is our reducer that we're building now. So I'm going to say new text. Actually, I'm not ready to do the new text yet. So I need a function that that is going to take essentially. Let me think a little bit. So we have our eraser. So new text is equal to, and I'm going to take the eraser, right, and I'm going to start to prepare that to something that I can build replacements in. So I'm going to actually do a with index in there. And remember, we started this index at 1 instead of 0. So I need to build that offset into with index. And so now I know that I know the index that comes with each one of the characters. And I can do something like enum.map, and I can say maybe replace, and then that's going to take one argument. Actually, let's make that take, let's pass the tuple, and let's also pass whether the, let's see, I need to grab the schedule, don't I? Okay, so now I have this guy, and there's a schedule, and that is the step, and there's the rest of the schedule, like that. So this is a list of indexes that I should not erase, right? Or that I should erase, actually. So I could say that I really need to build a function here, don't I? So function of character, or this is really a grapheme, isn't it? So that's a grapheme, and then there is a and there's an index. And this is the grapheme. And let's kind of clean this up a little bit. This is grapheme, and this character is in the step. This is a grapheme, isn't it? No, index in step. Okay. Okay, so now I can write this. Now I can join these back up, right? And I should be good to go. And I should be able to say erase. So this is going to return a eraser with a schedule of schedule. Now, this is the remaining schedule. We've dropped off step. We just processed that one. And the text is new text. And maybe, just to be a little more descriptive, this is erased text. Okay, so I think that that's pretty good, but I need to write this def maybe replace. And if there's a grapheme and there's a true.
Hey, Bruce.
Yeah.
You've got erase next at the top of that, and erase text.
Oh, there you go.
On your return.
Thank you. So this is why this type of mob programming works better. I mean, my bug density has been surprisingly low, but I promise I'll catch up. Okay, and so
we're letting you down by not telling you about the bugs. We'll find them later.
There you go.
I guess I should have let it ride then, right?
No. So only if you want to mock me, right? So, but I do think that one of the secrets to teaching Elixir is showing people that we make mistakes in our blog posts, in our videos, in our video instruction. Everything comes out like everything is designed perfectly the first time, right? And it just, in real life, just doesn't work that way. And this is the test. So this is going to return the grapheme. And I'm going to cheat. I'm going to look in the back of the book. Having built this before, I know that this works better when the grapheme and don't erase. So I know that this works better when you don't replace new lines and you don't replace blanks or punctuation. So I'm going to build this don't erase list. And I'm just going to put a few things in it right now, like a new line, like a space, like a period, like a comma, and like a question mark and an exclamation point. So I could probably do this with a regular expression, but I'm more sure about this. So that's a module attribute, and this is going to, and this is a guard. So this is going to fire. When this fires, when the grapheme is in that list, I'm just going to return it, whether or not it's time to replace it or not. Okay, so we're actually pretty far along in this application. We haven't touched LiveView yet, right? So let's recompile. Who thinks this is going to recompile? Who does not think this is going to compile? Aha, we all missed one. You see how I turned it on you? Okay, on 27, unexpected token, close parentheses, 25, 26, 27. Okay, yeah. So this is maybe replace. And yeah, so I haven't closed the map right there. Beautiful. Unexpected token again. The function is missing an end. So that means that something is imbalanced.
Don't you have an extra one at the end of step there?
Function and step.
Since you put it after the word end.
Yeah, okay, there you go. So is that it? Okay, so now we can say eraser. So we have an eraser, don't we? Yeah, so that's already imported. So we're going to say new, and we're going to say speech dot passage, and this is going to be Macbeth, right? And then this is going to take 4 steps. Great. And so we can take that eraser, and then we could pipe that to our reducer. Okay, so enumerable is not okay. So we didn't cut that up. So right. Okay, so we're already starting to replace some of those, right? Great. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. It should be gone except the punctuation, and it is. So that's excellent. So now all we have to do is flip on over to LiveView and implement our interactive user interface, which is kind of cool. So we're actually going to use a technique that I love to use in LiveView, which is to basically separate the life cycle into two distinct steps. The first step, we're going to hard code the data into the context. And the second step is just transforming with reducers what's in the state for the live view, what's in the socket. So let's go ahead and create our live view. So we're going to need a route. So memweb. So this is the router. And we're going to steal this one. I don't think we need, so this last attribute is a live action. And we're going to say game live, and no live action. So I think that we're done there. Now we have to write the live view itself, and we're just going to drop it straight in there. So we're going to drop the file in. So this is game live.ex, and we can grab just the top of this one. And I'm going to, against my better judgment, I'm going to drop off the impl equals true, because I think it's so I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of teaching what behaviors are right now. But basically, all I'm doing with LiveView is this is actually calling the using macro on this particular module. And so it's dropping in a few extra bits of code. So if I go to memit web, and I go to the bottom, do you see this using macro? That's what I'm calling every time that I use. And you can basically, even if you don't know macros, you can tell what's going on here. So let's see if we can't give it a try. So I'm going to go back to here, and it says, so apply basically takes a module and calls this function with these arguments. Well, what's the function? The function is LiveView. So there ought to be a function called LiveView here. Yes, and you can see that we're using macros to drop in some text here. Use Phoenix LiveView, right? And this is the layout that we're going to use. The layout view in the live.html, right? And then there's view helpers. So we ought to be able to find view helpers in a function, and there they are, right? And here we're using macros again to drop in some code, right? So here it's playing the same game with use phoenix.html. And so that gives me, you can see the forms tags and all that stuff. This is the live view helpers, which gives me the implementation of things like, I don't know, the render and things like that. The things I can use inside the render. And then I do the same thing with Phoenix View and so on and so forth. But basically, what's happening, so part of that use live view is this is a behavior, which means that so in a library, my program code calls the library code. In a behavior, that model is flipped on its head. So in the behavior, someone else has written the application, and the application calls my code in the form of callbacks. And so this impl true right here says, hey, I expect there to be a callback called mount in the behavior. And if it's not, I want you to yell at me, in this case with a warning. Okay, so we have a socket, and we're going to assign a socket. And I said that there's a technique that I like to use here. And the technique is that I'll very often hard code my live views at this phase, right? So, okay, and then assign, and yeah, that took me a while to get right, didn't it? So this is my eraser, and so to build an eraser, I'm just going to say eraser.new, and this is going to take text, which is speech.passage, And we want 4 steps. Okay, so we need to alias our this really isn't context. This is more like a core. So alias, so mem.mit dot game dot eraser. And so now I can use the eraser.new. That's great. So now we need a render. So PageLive didn't have a render. And so the way that the default implementation says, if there's no render, then look for a template with a live view of the same name. And so I can basically write this instead as grabbing this code and dropping it into a render function with what's called a live view sigil. And that's what we're going to do in GameLive. Okay. Okay, so I want you, for those of you who haven't used LiveView before, I want you to get your chat ready, and I want you to type something so that it'll help you remember it. I'll let everybody open up their meetup. Open your chat. Okay, so type the words, the socket is the state for a LiveView. So you will be amazed at how much more quickly the learning goes once your students recognize that a socket is the state for a live view. So everything that we do either renders state or changes state or establishes the initial state. So those are the 3 things we do in a live view. Mount establishes the initial state of a live view. In this case, all we're doing is adding to a special place for custom data in a key called assigns, assign plural, and we're adding these key value pairs. So in this case, we can take, and what we're going to do is look at that assigns. This is a sigil. In my LiveView class, we talk about how to write your own sigils and things like that. No time tonight. But I'm going to actually look at, and this is just substitution. I'm going to say inspect. Oh, you know what? So let's inspect assigns. Right. And here, I'm going to go ahead and pipe this to io.inspect. Okay, so what we're showing 2 things. The first thing is that assign is actually a reducer over socket. This is the accumulator, the state of the live view, and this returns another reducer like this, right? And so in Elixir land, IO inspect works like a reducer with a side effect. It basically inspects whatever you're working with and returns that thing untransformed. Okay, so now we ought to be able to go to, so have we started this thing yet? Okay, can't define PageLive. Okay, so we need to tidy that up. This is GameLive. Okay, it looks like we're working there. So now I ought to be able to go to, okay, so now we can see that we have the context in here, right? And very often what I'll do is I'll take my eraser, I'll take my my assigns, and I'll just drop it in there. Or actually, in this pre-section, I'll basically do something like this. So there's often some important state that I need to keep around while I'm debugging. And as I'm building the system, I do 2 things. The first thing is, as I'm working on it, I hard code this one, right? So later, I'll leave it as an exercise for the user to actually take this data in a form. And what I'd like you to do is do that in a schemaless change set. Learn the technique. It'll change your life with LiveView. And so the second thing is that, so now I can hard code, I could basically change this up by hard coding the eraser to different points of its life cycle. And I can basically make my view richer and richer and richer till it's fleshed out and it has everything that I need. And then only then do I switch directions and start to work on the implementation of the handlers. Okay, so now what we need to do is start to make our game take shape. So this is to say mimit and then I'll do what? I'll say memor this, and then I'll say, you see I'm kind of running out of gas today. And so what we're going to do in here is we will we'll essentially put we'll drop the eraser.txt in there. And let's see what that looks like. So we'll memorize this, and then we'll have a button that says erase some. Okay. Let's see what that looks like. So there's our speech, and then there's our erase sum button. And we haven't done anything with that yet. What we're going to do is essentially decorate this with some Phoenix, some HTML data tags. And one of them is called Phoenix click. And what this is going to do is going to use some framework JavaScript that's going to detect when a click happens on whatever this construct is. It happens to be a button, but it doesn't have to be a button or a link. And it's going to send this event over the socket. Let's call it erase. And then once I send this over the socket is going to translate this to an HTTP, to an OTP cast. And if you don't know OTP, you ought to join Groxio's OTP class. Even if you do know OTP a little bit, you'll learn something. You ought to join us. We're doing that in a couple of weeks here. But I'm going to basically let this much fly. And then we're going to press the button, and you're going to see this crash. Right? So you see the spinning beach ball. We crashed, and OTP brought us back up. But it says that our handle event isn't there, which is true. We asked to handle this event, then we didn't provide the code to handle it, right? And so this is the shape of the code. So let's go ahead and grab that, and then we could say def handle event, right? So that's the event we want to handle. We're not using any of the metadata that gets passed, but we can pass a little metadata along the way. And you can see that this thing is a socket. So we're going to take a socket here. Okay, while your chat is open, I want you to type something else. Keep your handlers skinny. Keep your handlers skinny. If you do that, what you're forcing yourself to do is build reducers into this particular function, right? And if you'll notice, this is a LiveView. And in Elixir, we like the first argument to be the data that this particular module supports, right? And what's the data for the LiveView? The socket. So that I could do something like this. And then I could say erase socket. So this is erase, and it's going to take a socket. It's going to return a socket, and one way to do that is with a sign. And we're going to put a new eraser in. So erase. Remember, this is that special key that has all of our custom data. Most of the rest of this is reserved for LiveView. But our data goes in here, and we want the eraser. So basically, all we did was replace that key with this tiny convenience function, right? And this is going to be a socket like that. Maybe I'll one line that. I think that'll be okay. As they get bigger, I like to kind of stack them like that so I can see what's happening. Okay, so now we ought to be able to see something work. And I think that that's probably a pretty good place to wind up. I'd love to get your comments about the teaching techniques and to open up some discussion about what you like and what you didn't like about the style of this learning experience where we made mistakes and we actually worked through them. And also, I'd like your comments about the idea of really working hard to build constructors that have validated data that work through reducers. Comments, questions?
I think if I understood correctly, what you were saying earlier is that working in pipes and pipelines is happy, and working with is not happy. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. Okay. So basically, what typically happens is when we are composing, it is easier to compose with certainty, right? So if you notice, kind of the order that Elixir was built, pipes existed long before widths did, and pipes gained their significance long before width did. And the reason that that's true is that we kind of long for mathematically certain simple expressions of ideas like that, right? So what happens in Elixir land is that we typically try to put too much in the boundary layer, which is the context, right? And so what that means is that we're dealing with databases, we're dealing with unclean, unsanitized, unvalidated data. And so we have to be able to check error conditions in every tiny little thing that we do. Right. So what I'm suggesting is do the validation in tiny slices. Right. So one of the techniques that I use is when I'm using my LiveView, if it's not something that's complicated, like, for example, the one that I have right here, what I would probably do going forward is to build in a form where you could type in your own text and you could type in your own number of steps. And I would build a validation, a schema-less chain set. And I would call that form data, and I would store that schema-less chain set with the view side, with the LiveView code. And somebody, a lot of people don't like that idea at all because that has ecto in it, and ecto is a boundary concern, and that belongs on the other side of the fence. But I believe in this case that it is strictly the validation of form data, and it allows to spend longer a longer period of time in pipeline. But it's what designing Elixir systems with OTP is all about. And I know you have a signed copy, Tim.
I just want to reiterate, we've had we've had good experience with using change sets as a tool for validating user input, and not just like before it goes to the database, but also just from forms or whatever. I do think it, and their schema-less change sets particularly are pretty easy to use. So
yes, your library is on my list. Or was it the forms library? Whose was that?
It's not mine.
was that Brian's? I don't know this. But that there's a little library that kind of does some of that and wraps up some of those concerns. If I can't find something that I'm happy with, I'll probably just rough out some ideas and throw them up there. But I think that basically you need 4 concerns, right? So very often what I want to do is I want to get into my pipe, right? If I can get clean data into my pipe, and if I can mix clean data in at every step of the pipe, then I don't have to worry about those width compositions that can get really nasty. And I can start to write that code that tells a story. And Tim, I am way dyslexic. So that makes me really happy when I can strip away the ceremony, right? So yeah, but the four concerns are one, well, what are the fields? What are the types, right? What does the what are the validation rules? And and how do I build a new one without the change set, right? So there's like a something that looks like validate, which is we call change in a lot of our applications. There is a module attribute called types that has the fields and the types in them, and then there's also just a simple constructor that builds a mapper struct with the thing that we're working on, and I call it form data, and it works great. What do you think about the terminology of reducer? Does it drive anybody nuts, or do you like it? Because I think that when we can think about there's a man. So Greg, I think that you commented on this session at Lone Star Elixir, but there's a man named Melvin that had gone through a coding boot camp and had gone straight from there to the to code Elixir. He kind of wanted more and better organization. And he said, I started to get Elixir when I learned everything is reduce. And so I said, well, I saw this in a Dave Thomas session that he used the term reducer, and I'm going to steal that from him everywhere. I really think that that saying OTP is reduced and LiveView is reduced and pipes are reduced and reduce is reduced, right? So all these things are taking an accumulator and adding to it, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly. I think that this is that's one of the big breakthroughs I've made this year. The other one, and that's in breakthroughs, I mean teaching, but also things that have shaped my code. So the other breakthrough is the idea that if you have three types of functions and you try to make all of your public functions one of the three types in a particular module, if you can get 100% there, you're okay. If you can get 90% of the way there, you're better than if you don't even try. But the types of functions are reducers. Those are the most important, the constructors and converters, right? So a constructor actually produces the type. A converter or a transformer takes you from one family of reducers into another. And then, of course, is the reducers. But if I do that, my tests can tell better stories. I can spend much more time in pipeline, and I'm just a happier man.
Yeah, you asked for comments about the word reducer.
Yeah.
There was a conference talk I saw online. I think it was from the guy who did Credo.
Ah.
And he talked about that. I think he called it token flow. He talked about different ways of doing flows. Is that the same thing you're talking about with reducer as a token flow? Because the token flow is what it really helped me understand it.
Yeah, James Gray too. So and that's we basically use the word token more in designing Elixir systems with OTP. But I think the token is talking about it from the perspective of the data that you pass through, right? And so he was using token like a game token that moves around a board, right? Something that encapsulates the state of a live complex system. And I like that. I like that a lot. So the token, I think, is the accumulator, the data, and token flow is basically the functions that make that up, which in my mind are reducers.
So Bruce, you were talking about clean data and handling that and helping keep you in pipeline as a result.
Yes.
I'm curious, have you played with witchcraft, and what are your thoughts on the lack of native support for monads in Elixir, or like mathematical monads, or like, some people argue that like the two tuple is a monad, but like without that being sort of like an official construct built into the language as a means to keep you in that state and sort of just very dynamically handle data regardless of what comes at you in runtime?
Three things, right? The first one is Brooklyn is the bomb. I mean, she is a great person. She's absolutely brilliant, and we're lucky to have more of her in conferences. So we got to spend. I gave my first talk that I've ever tried, where I basically set up a panel. 3 of the chairs were open, and I had a point that I wanted to get to, and all I did was ask questions, right? So I had Brooklyn in one of the seats for a good amount of the time, because I knew that she'd read 7 languages, 7 weeks, but I wanted people to say, to kind of get to the place where they recognized that passion was the most important thing. Passion and feeding the passion was the most important thing in a career, right? So first, I love Brooklyn. I think that she's brilliant. So second, the idea about monads, I'm going to answer that in a way that you might not be expecting. So I was a fly on the wall for a conversation that happened in Code Mesh in London. And the 2 people involved were Joe Armstrong, who I miss greatly, and another man named David Turner. So David Turner was the creator of a language called Miranda. So, and I am not worthy to wash these people's shoes, right? So I'm sitting back, just kind of trying to get as much of this conversation in as I can. And so the politics of the things was of these languages was really weird. Miranda would have been Haskell, except it was proprietary, right? And David recognizes that, and he'll say so. John Hughes, I've heard Philip Wadler say the same thing. But Miranda was very well positioned to be the academic language for studying type systems, right? But what David said was, can I be honest with you, Joe? And I said, oh boy, here comes a fight, the type fight. And, the room starts buzzing a little bit and kind of working this way. And he said, I did not expect it, but the reliability that you've been able to achieve with Erlang is really uncanny. And you've done it without types, right? So that conversation has stayed with me, ever since I heard it 10 years ago. It's still, kind of is knocking on my subconsciousness in a lot of different ways, right? And I think that what it shows me is that there are things in Erlang that basically work together, because the whole and Elixir 2 by extension, that work together because they've grown up that way, right? So we have some limitations based on types, right? But Miranda and Haskell and Scala and Elm and other languages with stronger, richer type systems also have some drawbacks, right? And one of those drawbacks is that it is very difficult to invite others into that community without a whole lot of study. So I would hate to see us lose a really nice potential teaching opportunity. So I look at today, the things that are happening today, as an opportunity for us to restack the deck, right? That in very much the way that people could skip a generation of wired technology to go cellular. We can skip a generation of object-oriented technology to go into functional programming and get people real jobs. So I've seen that happen just 4 times. And Tim, Brian, I know that you both want to see that happen more, and that's a lot of the reason that I'm here and that we're talking. But I would hate to see that opportunity I would hate to see us raise the bar too high for it to be teachable. I think one of the wonderful things about Elixir and by extension Erlang is that it's really approachable right now. especially with LiveView. So could you make a really effective, strongly typed language based on Elixir's foundations with monads and factoids and all those constructs? You probably could. And I have mixed emotions about that. So, but in terms of Witchcraft, it is a brilliant library. In terms of Brooklyn, who built Witchcraft, she's a brilliant person and a better human being. And we need more of them.
So it sounds to me like you're really firmly in the camp that Elixir is right where it needs to be in terms of batteries. Batteries not included, but readily swappable, right? Like
I wouldn't say firmly. I would say
so, right, because it's so extensible. You can have something like Witchcraft come in for people who that's how they already want to relate to the data, and they want those very deep mathematical concepts. But you don't have to have it, right? And you can build, as Joe said, incredibly, or as you said, David, right? David said, incredibly resilient without having those things, but you can still add them.
And you can, and I also, but I wouldn't say that I'm firmly in any camp. I mean, I've seen this community do some pretty incredible things. I saw the Java community basically, heading towards a brick wall, and then this thing called, bytecode enhancement happened, where they would basically take these models and stitch in a second dimension that Java desperately needed. With these things called dependency injection containers and this thing called Aspect J, and aspect oriented programming and Spring and all these things. So I'll say that that I'm a little bit leery. I'll also say that there are probably some things that we could do to take advantage of ideas that are growing in the community that would give us some of the same kinds of protections that you get from stronger type systems, right? So I could imagine Elixir's macro capability and Elixir's compile time structure. It's very friendly for doing things like very rich property-based testing in more of an automated way, and that would be really cool. I think that Chris Keithley has, oh man, that guy has some really brilliant things. There's a framework called Norm where he's basically checking conditions, much like you do in the Ada language. That I think that something like that gives you maybe even better protection than you would get in a typed language by describing, the pre and the post conditions for. So anyway, yeah, I think that there are some good typed language. I am always hesitant when I see a feature that's radically different from kind of the core of the language baked in after the fact. It's very, very easy to get that stuff wrong. But I mean, maybe it's already in the community anyway with Dialyzer. It's just done with a pretty awkward flow. Maybe there's enough of us ready for it. I don't know. I'm a little bit. You saw me delete some core concepts from the code to basically simplify the teachability tonight, and I still like to do a lot of that. You didn't see type specs, and I don't encourage anybody to code without type specs, but it does make the language more approachable for a small amount of time. So great questions, Jeff. Man, you're wearing me out. Any other questions or comments? Let me ask some questions. What do you like? How do you feel about the ability to move some of your code in your day-to-day job from boundary to core? If you could do it, would it be useful, and can you do it? Two different questions.
I think whenever you can work with pure functions, that's a good idea, and you should do that. And yeah, anything you can move into the core, I think is a good idea. Can you always do that? I don't think so, and I think that's one of the things that you know, it is nice when you're working in pipes and working with pure functions all the time, but when you are working in a more distributed environment or working with services that, you know, may or may not be available, it's a little trickier. And let it crash helps for sure, but like doesn't cover everything.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah,
I'll add to that like I think a lot of the building blocks that we have to work with don't make it easy to do that a lot of the time.
Yes.
Like I'll just say Ecto, for example, like the way that you build up the query, you often need information that you don't have where you need it, because you need to like tell it that I want you to do it this way, but use that core thing. And before you know it, you have like so many parameters you have to pass into the core thing that like you're basically doing all the work outside the core anyway.
I do some really cool things with Ecto with, I like to layer my Ecto layers much like I layer other applications. I like to compose, and I like to drop in one concept at a time, right? So it's like, you know, base query, older than, blah, you know, select out. So basically, I have really, really tiny functions that compose with Ecto, but I agree with you. And James, I definitely am never, ever, 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 ever saying that you should ever code a distributed system, the boundary layers with pipes. You know, my point is that if we can look for places like query composition that are pure functions, you know, I would suppose that probably maybe a third of my production code has queries that are in my boundary layer that should be in my core layer, and I would be happier if they were, right? I could write the tests based on the composition of the queries rather than the values that they returned, and I would be a much happier person. So yeah.
I'll also put out there that I've found that I'm a lot happier when I just actually write the SQL in SQL and not try to use any special fanciness from Ecto. And then you really do just have data, right? You call the thing, you get the data back, and then you do the functional stuff with the data.
That's really cool. I haven't really thought a lot about that. I have thought that, you know, I have seen things that some bundling in Ecto that is a little bit too tightly coupled, like the change sets is one that we're talking about now. I think that you know, so this is one of those things where maybe if we'd had some earlier contributions in Elixir to, you know, some people that were able to work on it, we'd have a little bit finer layering and finer composition. And maybe we would have seen some things like chain sets broken out and applied closer to the form layer, right? Like I think that the flow likes to jump in and out of user interface concerns and likes to jump in and out of boundary concerns the way that we're stacked up in some places. But if you actually make an effort to say, does this belong in core concerns, it's definitely possible, and will definitely make a pretty big impact on everybody's code. And so I think that when you talk in the Haskell community, like Brooklyn and I had a long conversation about the worker bee talk, right? About the worker bee layers. So I've been just a huge fan for a long time, and I hadn't met her until this March, but she kind of walks up to me after I gave the talk. And I was just really nervous because she is much more formally and classically trained than I am. But she said, first, I agree with every word that you said. Second, this is where the concepts came from. And, you know, there were concepts from James Gray, right? The imperative shell functional core. And she said, this is the papers where they came from. And third, this is the extra layer that you would have if you were in a stronger, more strongly typed system. It's like a protocol layer between your boundary and core. I thought that was all really cool. Okay, does everyone want to get off the call? So I will hang around for a little while for anyone who wants to just talk. Before I go, though, Mark, it's really good to see you. Greg, Tim, and Jeff, thanks once again for your support. You guys have had a much bigger impact on our personal lives than you would believe, with those little bits of sponsorship. That's the difference between being, you know, nicely profitable and kind of scraping by and wondering if we're ever going to do this again. So thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Everybody, let's give it up for Bruce Tate tonight. Thank you very much for joining us and presenting. It was awesome.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, love it. And again, thank you very much to Tim Mecklem for helping set this up. Definitely appreciate that. I know Tim and I are going to talk some more because he floated somebody else by me for a possible upcoming maybe presenter. So not going to say anything until we know, just because I don't want to, you know, put it out there and it be, you know, the overpromise, underdeliver our dilemma. I don't want that. But yeah, definitely thank you for helping set this up and getting Bruce to join us tonight. I wanted to loop back on a couple things real quick and then just open it up to everybody. So if you want to have a discussion, but first thing I missed when I was doing my housekeeping stuff, Jeff, you're right. My beard is much shorter. It used to be down here to the middle of my chest. I cut it back a little bit, and then during this time, I cut it back even shorter. So I'm going in the reverse direction with all that.
Was it when you stopped using monads?
Right.
So Brian, now that he's not here, I can tell you, Johnson, his beard is about as long as it's been since I've known him. But about a year and a half ago, he had what he called his Britney Spears moment, where he shaved it all off for a wedding. Yeah. And he regretted it immediately. And everyone he worked with, including myself, made sure that he regretted it. So if you're in a similar boat with your colleagues, it's probably a good thing that you don't see each other face to face every day for a little while.
Well, I have my wife. When I was thinking about it, I was getting a little itchy, and I walked up. I said, "You know, I'm thinking about cutting my beard down." And I said, "What do you think?" She just looked at me and said, "No." And I said, "Why? Do you like it?" She goes, "I don't think you'll like it." And then I cut it short, and you know, they say, like, if a person has an amputated limb, they have a phantom limb. I have a phantom beard. I'll lean in to eat soup, and I'm constantly going like this to reach for it, to pull it back, and it's just not there. I've had it for 7 years, and I cut it down this short after being about 12 inches long, so it's still deeply ingrained. So I wanted to at least acknowledge that you called that out, because I was in the middle of that, and I thought I saw something roll by. The other thing is, again, we recorded this meeting. Whenever that's done processing, I'll download that, get it all prepped and ready, and get it on our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and just search Columbus Elixir, you can subscribe to that. We've got quite a few talks out there now from our in-person meetups and one of our remote meetups. So definitely go check that out, share that around to help spread the community. Let them know that this community is here and it's growing, and we'd love to have them join us. Also, I wanted to mention, I wanted to say I was searching Cincinnati Elixir, and there's a fantastic playlist through the Gaslight YouTube channel. They have a bunch of playlists there. They have a Cincinnati JavaScript, which has like 39 videos in it, some Cincinnati Ruby, some various things like that. So I would say go check them out as well and subscribe so you can check out some awesome programming videos and follow their Columbus or their Elixir playlist as well. And then another thing that Jeff pointed out is that this Thursday is, and I forgot to mention this, is the Kansas City Elixir. Their event is this Thursday, and it's through Eventbrite. He posted it in the chat, but let me post it again so it's current here as well. Oops. It is this Thursday. You can register through Eventbrite. Oh yeah, and it looks like Amos posted Kansas City Elixir has a YouTube channel, so definitely check them out as well. That's awesome. Thank you very much, Amos. In fact, Amos, I'm glad you're here. Did you want to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing in Kansas City Thursday for your event?
I have no idea what we're doing.
Awesome. Is there anybody else from Kansas City that's here that might know a little more detail about what's going on with that? That might want to.
So the description said it's about nerves.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, our website's not actually updated. It had last month on there, so I didn't look at the Eventbrite.
Yeah, Eventbrite's got some details, and they've got some pretty cool stuff going on. I know last month when we did this, I was sending out information about theirs. Last month, you guys had like a bot gaming battle or something like that.
Yeah. So we had one of the members. He's done it quite a few times, Alan Voss, but this last time he created Stratego using Scenic, I think.
That's awesome.
LiveView, I forget. And then everybody built bots to play it. Last year we did a robot battle, and he's also done what is it called? Where you have the ships. He sunk my battleship.
Battleship.
Yeah, but he gave it a different name. It was like
Highlands.
Non-monopolized strategic warship battles or something like that.
I would definitely say if you're always looking for more Elixir community and chat and great discussion, definitely check out the Kansas City one. There's always some chatter going on there. It's pretty awesome. And I know last month with the gaming one, there was a lot of shit talking to each other about whose bot was going to beat who, which was pretty fun to watch. So definitely check them out as well. They do some pretty fun stuff over there. And I've been putting ours out there so they could join here, and they've been very gracious and welcoming to want us to join them. So I would definitely say check out the Kansas City Elixir as well.
Thanks for putting that, Brian. I want to thank you for putting those links in our Slack and everything and inviting us. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about pushing the community forward, and things that you guys are working on in Kansas City might be a whole different thought process of what's happening over here in Ohio. So sharing some of those ideas of what you've encountered is what it's all about. So I'm glad you guys have been very welcoming and being able to attend like this. So that's been pretty awesome. I appreciate that. But yeah, definitely check out their YouTube channel, links in the description, as well as the Gaslight and the Columbus Elixir one. And check out our website. Again, links to our Slack and all that fun stuff. And if you're interested in helping out with katas or have ideas on that, I'd love to chat with you as well. And because I did mention this and somebody put it in the chat, Cleveland, I'd love to connect with some organizers up there. I pinged it through Meetup, the organizer, and I haven't gotten a response, but definitely want to connect more with people from Cleveland. Obviously, we're working with Cincinnati and anyone in Dayton. Somebody mentioned Ohio Elixir, and I love it. So let's see what we can do on that. And I know James and I are going to be talking more. That's all I have to go over. Does anyone have anything they want to announce to the community or discuss or ask questions about? Floor is open. Go for it.
Hey, missed you there, Amos. So Amos is another one of those. So gosh, half my screen right now is the most important sponsors in the Gig City Elixir and Lone Star Elixir conferences. It's Tim, Greg, Jeff, and Amos with a circle. That's really, really cool. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I really like the layers concept you got there, Bruce. I think it's really something that could be helpful for people to get in their mind as far as breaking down structure of a application. What I think kind of jumps out at me though also is the functional and the data part. When we talk about domain-driven design, that's the core domain, right? And a lot of the tactical patterns in DDD are about how to get that. So I've been kind of messing around with trying to figure out how to map the technical patterns of DDD to Elixir, but I think you've got the majority of it there. And what the kind of the point of having that core domain is that then you can use those words, the data models, and the functional core logic to discuss things directly with your users. That's the ubiquitous language. And I'm wondering if you could, if you could take it another couple of steps there, that would kind of complete that circle. Not just having that functional core and data being things that are programming concepts, but that we can talk to users about. Have you kicked that around yet, or has that come up before?
I've started to think in that direction. I'm by no means an expert and not ready to write about it or teach it yet, but I've started to think in that direction. I think that the other opportunity is actually pretty closely related. There are a number of DSL programming techniques. Like I'm reviewing a Kotlin book by a man named Venkat Subramaniam, who's a wonderful man and good friend of mine from the No Fluff Just Stuff days. You probably saw Venkat speak in Cincinnati, right? He has like 2/3 of the talks at the conference. He never sleeps. He writes a book a month. But he's writing a DSL book in Kotlin. And so many of the same concepts that you're talking about, he's thinking about, and actually using practical advice to apply techniques in a language. It really just is about using all of the tools in our Elixir toolbook, and in that case, Kotlin's toolbook, to bring the concepts, to basically strip away ceremony, to think about what the core and nameable concepts are, and to express those in ideas that read more like sentences. And I like it a lot.
I think the first time I heard Venkat speak, he was talking about aspect-oriented programming, and it blew my mind. It took me probably a week to wrap my head around the stuff he was talking about. And you mentioned that with the bytecode stuff earlier. I heard you slip wit and say EJB earlier.
Yeah, so that's one of my darkest moments. I actually wrote a book with Mike Clark of who does the Pragmatic Studio videos. Wonderful guy. But we wrote a book called Bitter EJB. I should have stopped after one of the Bitter books. The Bitter Java was already a bad idea, but gosh, that was too much of a good thing, right?
Java just had more to give, though.
There you go. So I don't know if you've all heard the story yet. I have to tell it though. So there's I left a growing career at IBM, and kind of knew I was making a mistake, but all of my friends were leaving IBM to join startups, and many of them were, millionaires many times over. I just watched it happen with dumb business model after dumb business model, and they were all popping, and so I wanted to play too. So I joined this company that I won't kind of drag through the mud, but it was the worst business. So literally the business idea was, you have this desk drawer full of cards that fall out from all the hardware that you buy, and we're going to put that all in a database so that you could access all those really important things, right? So anyway, that startup blew up in like 2 months. This was like right before the turn of 1999 to 2000, and so I was living at home. Then my mother-in-law said, "Hey, I've got cancer. I'm coming to live with you guys," because she was overseas, couldn't get treatment. So I literally had a dying mother-in-law in the breakfast nook, right? Because there were no upstairs bedrooms. So, but anyway, I wrote this book. I said, so the startup had blown up, the economy was gone. I asked to come back to IBM. They said, "No, we won't take you." I said, "Well, come on, I have these walk-on-water performance reviews." They said, "We're not hiring anybody. We won't be for a good long time." So I said, "At least I can write." And so I wrote this book called Bitter Java. And it was a terrible book based on a terrible concept that it's a good idea to teach people by saying, "No, don't do that. that neither, those are all terrible ideas, right? It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall, where you have the surfer saying, nope, nope, don't do that. No, try harder. No, try less. Try less. Do less. Do less. Nope, nope. And so he's just giving all this negative. So that was bitter Java, right? But at that point, nobody was delivering books on the internet yet. Amazon was starting to sell them there, but they were paper books, and they weren't reselling them yet. And a site called Slashdot found them, and so Slashdot was a big deal. Besides being unable to Google Slashdot, everything else about it was like intensely viral, right? It's like Slashdot. That's so anyway, they started having this meme. They started talking about what Bitter Java was about. And it wasn't about any of those things, right? It's like Bruce Tate comes to stick it to the man to say the enterprise is going down, that Java is. And so they started talking about this meme started rolling. And so dying mother-in-law in the breakfast nook without a job, but me starting to get like a book that's highly rated on Amazon, right? Now, I'm not talking about like for a technical book. Well, I mean, yeah, like for a technical book, right? So it was 2 million, which was pretty good. And then, we'd reload 2 hours later and it'd be like 100,000. And then we reload and it would be like 25,000. And then we kept reloading. The whole family, even the mother-in-law and the breakfast nook, we were just sitting around the computer, reloading. And it eventually, for 1 hour, got up to number 7 on Amazon between Hawkins and Grisham. Right? I mean, it was so wild on this book with this terrible concept. But anyway, so that's when I joined No Fluff, Just Stuff. And that's how I met Venkat Subramaniam. 1 hour. Then you know what happened? The book shipped. That killed it.
Every successful business starts with a terrible idea.
Yeah. Well, that basically started my consultancy. I met Dave Thomas, and he basically has shaped my career probably more than anybody else. Maybe with the exception of Joe Armstrong. Not that I spent a lot of time with either person, but the advice that they gave me was so meaningful and so powerful, and they gave it freely. Like Dave got me into the Ruby space. We were after one of these marathon No Fluff Just Stuff sessions, and the guy who puts them on had asked more people to carry more sessions, so we were giving like 5 or 6 talks. And it was really too much because building the talks and for everybody but Venkat, right? But as we were giving these talks, we would be getting shorter and shorter in our seats, and just the energy being sucked out of us. I mean, it's like, so standing behind a podium at a traveling conference where you give the same talks, city after city. Is kind of like sitting in an airplane seat. It doesn't sound like it should be sapping your energy like it does, but it does. But Dave was sitting on this train with me, and probably his patience was gone, but he's always the consummate British gentleman, right? So I was kicking around the idea of learning another language. Maybe sounds like it might be a good idea. I was like really sipping all the Java Kool-Aid. And so I had written this book that just won a jolt called Better, Faster, Lighter Java, right? And that was actually a pretty good book. But so I started asking Dave about Ruby, and I started getting more and more aggressive with him. He say, surely it can do this. No, it can't do this. It's not fast. It's and he turns around and he says, Bruce, shut up until you've done something non-trivial with Ruby, and then we'll have another conversation, okay? And so, after that, I basically did an implementation. It was pretty heavily cached, but all the Java stuff at the time was too. And it was, basically, since it was all cached, it was faster, It took me about a quarter of the time to build, you know, and me kind of fancying myself as a Java expert. It just completely reshaped me. And, you know, the same thing happened around Elixir, and same thing happened with my writing career, and, you know, kind of started watching him in my speaking career, but he had a big, big impact on me.
So, Bruce, my question is the dog on the floor with you right now?
Patrick, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
No, the dog has gone upstairs. She's out of here.
Yeah. Yeah, mine did the same thing. I have so during the day, I have a bed, you know, right next to my chair here, and that's where she stays.
How is Rosie?
She's doing good. She's in the living room right now. She's curled up on her blanket right now. So her work day is done. So she decided to get up and go by the couch. So that's where she's at.
Yeah. You staying safe, Patrick?
Yeah. We've been working remote since mid-March or so. So, you know, working for H6.
Tim's got the dog off the floor. Look at that.
Harry hangs out in the basement with me most of the time.
Yeah.
So he was at my feet most of the talk. I had to keep from kicking his tail.
Patrick was the very first ticket bot for Gig City Elixir, and was the very first Groxio Programmer Passport customer. So we always try to keep throwing Patrick some love. He's been around for a good long time.
Yeah, I got to hang out with Bruce and Maggie during last Elixir Conf, and that was a good time. So I really appreciate y'all spending the time. So that made it really great.
Those nachos, I mean, they were really good.
They were good, but they upset my stomach something awful.
Oh man, me too.
They were good though. They were fantastic.
They did some real damage.